back, everybody. I'm Jake, the Scary Story Guy, and sorry to spoil the title of this video, but today we are talking about one of the best horror novels I've ever read. And I don't say that lightly, but Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman is an absolutely incredible book. And to be honest, I wasn't expecting that much. The last two horror novels that I read because of Reddit were Michael McDowell's The Elementals, which I thought was only okay, and Mark Z. Danielewski's House of Leaves, which if you'd like to hear my fairly unhinged thoughts on that book, I've made a video on it, and it's girthier than usual. By the way, if you're new here and weekly reviews of horror books and movies sounds like your jam, or if you'd just like to hear me continue to use words like girthy, please go ahead and like this video, subscribe to this channel, it helps a ton. But anyway, I was beginning to wonder if Reddit was just full of it when it came to horror books, but they kept saying this one guy's name over and over, Christopher Buehlman, Between Two Fires. You have to read Between Two Fires. So I bought it, and when it got here, I was a little skeptical, because as you can see, the title's a little too high on the binding. The font inside doesn't exactly look like it was professionally published. I was like, oh boy, what sort of little passion project have I gotten myself into here? And then I read the first page. Guys, this book absolutely rips. It actually reminds me a little bit of The Name of the Wind, a fantasy book that I'm sure some of you have read, in that it just sells you from the very first page on the quality of the author's prose alone. So let me tell you what it's about, but while I do, feel free to open Amazon in another tab and get this book delivered to your house as soon as humanly possible. Okay, so Between Two Fires is branded as a tale of medieval horror. It takes place in France in the middle of the Black Death, alright? So already not where you want to be. For those of you who don't know, the Black Death was an outbreak of bubonic plague that struck Europe in the mid-1300s, and it did not stop the spread, folks. About half of Europe died by some estimates, so as you can imagine, that was disruptive to normal, everyday rhythms of life in a way that we can scarcely comprehend. I mean, if you thought things were bad a few years ago. This is the backdrop of Between Two Fires, which begins with a group of brigands who come across a teenage girl named Delphine alone on a farm. Now, as you might imagine, girls alone, law and order have basically just collapsed, and a group of bad men show up. So it looks like things are about to go south in a hurry for our girl, but it turns out one of the men is not quite as bad as he seems. That man, a former knight named Thomas, rescues Delphine, and she then tells him that she has been experiencing visions of angels. So one thing leads to another, and these two, along with a drunken priest they meet along the way, basically go on a road trip through medieval France with Delphine's visions as their guide. And all the while, stuff of absolutely biblical proportions is going on in the background here. We're talking angels and demons and war and heaven type shit. And so I think one of the things that Between Two Fires is perhaps best at capturing is the inherent horror in the religious mythos. We know about devils and demons and hell, of course, but Dante was a long time ago, right? They've kind of bled out of the public consciousness. They're more these abstract ideas than tangible realities to truly be afraid of. Not so with this book. This is some freaky shit, and Buehlman does a fantastic job of bringing it all to life in a way that is unique and modern, but still manages to feel timeless. So don't let the medieval setting put you off, first of all, because that only stretches so far. It's sort of like Game of Thrones in that, yeah, you know, it's knights and old-timey language, but not so much so that it feels stuffy. Characters have a surprisingly current way of speaking, to the point where it actually threw me off a little bit at first, but Buehlman does a really good job of striking that balance between the medieval setting and the modern reader. And speaking of the characters, all three of the major ones are just absolutely top-notch, okay? This is not like reading the Song of Ice and Fire books where, you know, you're pumped and jacked every time Tyrion's on the page, and then you turn the page and see that there's another Catelyn chapter coming up, and you're just like, no! These characters are enormously flawed, detestable, yet sympathetic and heroic, exactly as and when the author needs them to be. Even Delphine, they do a really good job of making her not seem like a Mary Sue, because the whole time it's just kind of up in the air, ambiguous. Like, is she really working for God? Is she deceived? Is she evil? Who knows? You get the feeling that the author just knows these characters fully. He's able to reveal exactly what he wants about them, exactly when he wants. It's A-plus characterization. And these characters are in a setting that, you know, forget the demons and the infernal beasts and the ever-present threat of hellfire. This place is just a tough hang. Imagine traversing through a world where half the people are dead. Right, and you know, maybe initially there were some efforts made to clean up mass graves, maintain order, but over time that just has completely fallen by the wayside. Corpses litter the roads. If you walk into a house, you know, looking for supplies, you might find more corpses, you might find people who are ready to kill you, you might find both. And of course you'll come across desperate, sick people who it's a matter of life and death to stay away from. People with these horrible black pustules all over their bodies. One might even say girthy pustules. So even if there's nothing religious, otherworldly going on here, this is already a great horror setup. But once we start diving into the true horror that underlies all of this, I mean, there's just some stuff in this book I'm not going to forget. It goes places that, even as a longtime reader of horror, surprised me, but not in a way that felt gratuitous, that felt like, oh, this is just obnoxious. It's all well proportioned, right? You never feel like you're jumping the shark, but it's just gnarly as hell. There's no other way to say it. I mean, frankly, this book gets so insane that at a certain point I was surprised. I had become surprised that it has such a mass appeal, that all these people on Reddit online are recommending it, because often with stuff that's more extreme, you find people getting put off by it. The audience for it becomes small, right? And as I was reading, I was like, I could definitely see that happening here, but it doesn't seem to be. Guys, Between Two Fires is not just one of the best horror novels I've ever read, but it's just straight up one of the best novels I've ever read in a really long time. The prose is immensely readable, the characters are likable, they're believable, and the horror elements themselves go to some truly surprising places. I've actually not yet given a book this rating on this channel yet, but there's a first time for everything, so I am going to give Between Two Fires 5 stars out of 5, and I'm going to say that any self-respecting horror fan should move it to the top of their to-read list. Alright guys, as always, stay tuned for more spooky content coming soon. There's so many movies, so many books, so little time, but in the meantime, thank you for watching this video, and here's hoping you survive to see the next one.